So now that we've defined the site for the Chapter 6 Start folder, we're going to see how Dreamweaver can deal with some of those web fonts that I've provided for you. First thing we need to do is to go to the Modify menu. And when we do, we'll go to Web Fonts. At this point, you're going to see the Web Fonts Manager window. You'll notice that it says Available Web Fonts and there's nothing on the list. So the first thing we're going to do is to add a font. Now, we have 4 different versions of the fonts that we're going to be looking for. Well, you don't have to worry about the name or the other versions. All we really need to do is to locate one of those versions. So we're looking for the EOT font. Let's start off with a font that I am using in the body tag of this design. And that font happens to be located not in the Start menu, but in the Chapter 6 menu. Now you might remember there was a folder there and it had a list of all of the fonts that we're going to be using. Notice the EOTs are highlighted because that's the first one we're looking for. So the font that I'm using on my body for most of my body text is a font called Kaluna. So let's grab Kaluna and we'll open that file. Once we do, you'll notice that Dreamweaver is smart enough to figure out, okay, well, if you got the EOT font in that folder, you must have the other ones there as well. So it works. Now the OK is not highlighted until you click on this little button that says I have properly licensed the above fonts for website use. Then we'll click OK. Once that's been added, we're going to need to add the other ones. So let's do that as well. Go to the Add Font. We'll look for another font in Chapter 6, Font folder. And let's try this Avro font. Once we license that properly, we click OK. Let's add the third font. And I'm going to come in here to the font folder and we'll choose the foundation icons. That's great. And we'll complete the process for all the other fonts that we're going to be looking for as well. There's 2 more, League Gothic. And we'll click OK for that, as well as working with our final font, which happens to be called Museo. So Museo Sans, and we'll click on that. So we've got 5 different versions of fonts. Now, generally I wouldn't suggest that you use 5 different versions of fonts on any given web page, but we're going to be using them sparingly and in fashion that would be actually conducive to pretty decent design ideals. So we'll click Done, and once that is done, we need to now start addressing how Dreamweaver can introduce these fonts into our design. Let's take a look. In the Files menu, you might remember that our Chapter 6 Start folder, the one that we have here, only has typography and CSS inside of it. That's it. Well, let's see how we can make this work. There is the CSS styles right here, and you'll notice layout.css has a number of different things that I have prepared, including those links and all the other elements. You might remember that on the body tag, we have just some basic background and font size and font style. I'll even add something else like font weight normal. I think that would be a good thing to do. Let's just add a property like font weight. Once we have the font weight defined, we can come in here and give it normal. All right, we have that in place. Not really much going on after that. Now, before we actually go about adding these fonts to our design, there's one other thing that we need to do. We are going to go to our File menu, and if you remember, here is Chapter 6, and I can go to the Manage Sites area. And in Chapter 6, Managing the Site, I want you to double-click on Chapter 6, and that'll open up the site setup that we saw before. This time, I want you to go to the Advanced Settings. And in the Advanced Settings, we will see Web Fonts. What we want to do is to make sure that this folder is going to be pointing to the right spot. you'll see here it says Chapter 6, in the Start menu, I want you to give me a folder called Web Fonts. Now, if you wanted to, you could put a / in front of that, and basically Dreamweaver will be creating this for you as we go along. Okay, I'll leave it at this point the way it's written, and I'll just hit Save. Then this will be done. Okay, so at this point, let's now introduce some of these styles where we need them to be. So I'm going to ask you to go to the CSS styles. Let's click on the body. You might remember we added font weight by adding a property just a second ago. But this time, let's open up our familiar window. You could do that by double-clicking on body, or you could even go down here where the little pencil mark is that says Edit the Rule. Now I want you to go to the category called Type. And here where it says Font Family, I'd like you to open this up, and you'll see that right away there's a bunch of fonts that are available. Ah, look, these are all those fonts that we had added ourselves. Cool. Now, one of the things you'll notice when you see these lists is that they have usually more than one font. And basically what that means is these are all basic fonts that you'll find on any computer. Verdana should be available, Geneva should be available, and there's a third one, sans serif or sans serif. So what does it mean? Why do we have 3 of them here? Well, basically it's saying, look, if that system does not have Verdana, give me Geneva. If it doesn't have Geneva, give me any sans serif that is on that system. Doesn't really matter what it is. And here, same thing with Georgia, Times New Roman, Times, and serif. So what we also want to do is to add our own little list as well. So in other words, when I come in here and I say, hey, I want Kaluna Regular, which is a serif font to be used, I also want to default to some other ones. Now I've created one already. As you'll see here, it says Kaluna Regular, then Georgia, then Times New Roman, and then any serif. All right, now I've done that before, but I'll show you how to do it as well. Check it out. If we go to the Edit Font List, and we open up the font list that we have here, you'll see a number of available fonts. Now I've got a lot of fonts on my system, but I'll quickly run through this for you. The fonts that we've created are available down at the bottom. So notice, if I select Kaluna Regular, we're going to add it to our little list, and you'll see it right here, how it's written. And then, since this is a serif font, I'm going to go through creating a number of other ones. So we'll also come in here and I'll put in Georgia. So it might take me a second to find it. There you go. There's Georgia. We'll add that to the list and you'll see it's getting built. Kaluna Regular, then Georgia. Let's look for Times New Roman. And here's Times New Roman. I'm also going to include any sans serif. So, or actually rather, this is a serif, not a sans serif. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom and then you just click up once or twice or 3 times, you'll see the very base ones are here at the bottom as well. So we're saying, look, any serif. So now we have a nice little list. Kaluna Regular, Georgia, Times New Roman, and any serif font. So I'll click OK. At this point, we're going to have to pick it again. So we'll go all the way down right here and we'll choose the font that we've just created. Once we click OK, let's take a look at what's happened. Well, first of all, you'll see that in the layout.css here, there's a new little element here that says stylesheet.css. And look up at the top here. We have our regular HTML source code, and we have our layout.css, but it's also saying there's a new stylesheet.css that's been attached. Where did that come from? Well, Dreamweaver has created it for you. Let's take a look. If you open it up, it's got the new @font_face information right here. It's written all of the code that you'll need to make this CSS3 @font_face work for you. Now, how did it attach itself the way it did? Well, let's look at the source code. If we go up to the top, here I'm just going to look only at the source code. You'll see that in the HTML, it's only linking to one file, layout.css. But where is style.css linked to? Well, that's found in the layout.css itself. If you scroll all the way to the top, look what Dreamweaver has done. It's written at import this URL. Go to the web fonts folder, find me Kaluna Regular, and you'll see a style sheet in there. And that is what's loading this style sheet file right here. So I'm going to save this, Command S. Now, let's also look at something else. If I go to the Files window and we take a look at our files, well, let's refresh this and see what happened. Inside of it, Dreamweaver has created, right next to the CSS, the web fonts folder that we were looking at just a second ago. And if we open that up, hey, Kaluna Regular is in there, and all the Kaluna Regular fonts are there, and the stylesheet.css file is right here as well. So that's really fantastic. Dreamweaver has given us the ability of introducing new fonts, and in doing so, it's written all of the code for you. Super nice, very fast, and a really easy way of managing that. Come back in the next video, and when we do, we're going to start styling some of the other elements. Now, before we do that though, just take a look. If you're in your design view, you might not really notice anything different. I've told the body to let Kaluna be the default font. But check it out. Usually when we're working with web fonts, we would have to go to Live View to preview exactly what that looks like. You see the difference? It's showing up all the Kaluna fonts for the entire body. The entire body is now styled using Kaluna. And check it out. When I turn off Live View, this is the next one in that list, right? So it doesn't have Kaluna that it's previewing, so it's going to the Georgia font. But if I go to the Live View, wow, check it out. Now we've got a brand new font that we don't have by default in everyone's system, but this one is going to be working just perfectly for us. So come back in the next video and we'll see about styling some of the other elements.